everybody. Welcome to the first of our interview series with astronomy people, space enthusiasts, people who are working in the industry and people who aren't. Our first guest today is from the Royal Ontario Museum here in Toronto, Ontario. This is Julie Tome. Hi, Julie. How are you?
Hi.
Tell us about what you do in astronomy and space.
Okay, well, I work at a major cultural institution where I get to do some teaching in the planetarium and in other parts of the building as well that relate to astronomy and space. And I do a lot of things away from work as well. So I'm one of the co-hosts along with you, Ryan, on York Universe, Mondays at 9 Eastern local time, whatever it happens to be, daylight savings or not. I've done presentations for all sorts of groups, everything from kids' space clubs to even once an ornithology club.
Ooh, that sounds fun.
I know, right? Ornithologists are great. For those of you who don't know, an ornithologist is someone who studies birds.
Yes. Which are they're a little bit closer than space.
A little bit closer.
Yeah. So Julie, one of the first questions that I have for you is about this whole planetarium thing. What do you love about doing a planetarium program for a group of kids?
It's pretty rare that you'll get a kid in there who's just like, yeah, whatever.
Uh-huh.
It's instant interest. Especially now that we've gone digital. There's just so much. I'm not limited to space in the planetarium. In fact, I've done presentations about dinosaurs in the planetarium. And those are fun because you get to like, it's fully immersive. You're in this bubble. And I always tell people in the planetarium that I have a superpower. My superpower in the planetarium is that I can control time. And then I make time go faster, slower, whatever. I move us to different places in the world. Missed the solar eclipse a few years ago. It's okay. I'll show you what that is. I've had all sorts of people in the dome at a previous in a previous lifetime when I was still working up in Sudbury. We brought the traveling planetarium to a youth correctional facility.
Wow.
And they were first of all, it was something completely different than what they experience every day. They were so interested and had so many questions. I just love being in the dome and having people ask me questions. And just it becomes like a give and take, right?
Right. And that's one of the things I love about a planetarium is that it takes you into this other world, right? Where all these real celestial objects are now, you can fly to them, you can travel to them. You were talking about an eclipse. You can go not just through time to when the eclipse happened, but travel through space and see what the eclipse looked like from this one specific spot on Earth or in outer space. It gives you a lot more options. When I have little groups of really young kids in the planetarium, we often talk about how we're in a spaceship, and that's part of the adventure too, is that they actually can envision themselves flying around in space inside this big dome.
I just recently tried something with some little ones, like they were 4 and under.
Oh yeah.
And we were standing up, and we were on the moon, and we were looking up at the stars from the moon. And one little guy goes, "I'm feeling moonsick."
Oh no.
I was like, all right, let's just sit down. I was like, that's really adorable that you said you were feeling moonsick and not like motion sick or whatever. Kids just pull out the most hilarious things sometimes.
Well, that might be the first ever case of reported moon sickness, aside from maybe some of the astronauts who went there back in the 60s and 70s. But the question I have for you is, you're obviously somebody who has a really cool job working at the ROM. You have a lot of really active space interests. You run the planetarium. You do lots of programs. What started it all for you? Was it something that when you were really young, you were interested in science and it kind of grew with you, and then space was an afterthought? Or has it always been space stuff that's gotten you excited?
Yeah, that was a primary goal, actually. I
Wow.
remember, and I think I still have it somewhere in the house, our astronomy unit in grade 1. And I don't know if when you were in school, your teachers were doing this, but when we had a unit, we were given like the huge piece, like the tabloid sized piece of construction paper that we would fold in half, and you would write the name of the unit and make a drawing. And that was where all your photocopied worksheets were going to go, because yeah, that's a fun way to learn. And I still have that one from grade 1, and I missed a syllable. It proudly says Astronomy across the top.
Astroview, yeah,
Well,
Astronomy.
yeah. I mean, I guess it says Astromy, but
Yeah.
um, it just blew my mind that there was something other than the Earth, right? Like, because when you're 6 years old, like, there's your town, your school. You may have traveled abroad, but like beyond the Earth. Mm.
I mean, when you're really young, it's just mom and dad, and then as you get older, it becomes your neighborhood, and then your town. But there's so much more out there, right? And astronomy really shows you that the world is so much bigger, and that space is so much bigger than what we know.
Yeah, I mean, and we were just looking at the solar system, right? And I was like,
Yeah.
wait, there are other planets out there? There are other, like, first of all, the Earth is a ball? What? And then in grade 6, we had the next astronomy unit. And that was when I was like, you know what? I love this stuff. I'm going to be an astronomer.
Wow, right
So
then and there.
right then and there. And that stayed with me till I got to university. When I started university, the plan was bachelor's, master's, PhD, prof.
Wow, the whole nine
Yeah, the
yards.
whole shebang.
Yeah.
Like, what else were you gonna do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to know some of the, well, first of all, I got to do some university studies, and I was like, oh, this is hard. And I got to know the graduate students. I hung out with some graduate students, and I was like, come up with your own research questions. I don't, write a thesis. I don't know that I could do that. And then I was like, so what am I going to do? Right? Like, I've had this plan forever. What am I going to do? And I was thinking, when I picture myself as an astronomer, I didn't picture myself doing the research. I pictured myself doing the teaching. I was like, well, all right, I will become a teacher. And that whole time I was working at the observatory at York, doing public tours and public viewing sessions and really enjoying that. Went to teachers college. I taught in a school board for a year. Hated it. It was like, yeah, it was just not for me.
Wow, so it's really interesting to me that you taught for an entire year, and despite not really liking this mainstream classroom kind of thing, even though you were discouraged, you still found a way to do education, to get back into astronomy, and to do things that you're really passionate about. And I think a lot of people get discouraged if a job is not exactly what they wanted, but it does open doors to a lot of other places.
You know what? I was discouraged much earlier, because it was partway through teachers college, actually, that I was like, yeah, no. But I've invested half a year and several $1,000s into this program, so may as well finish it. Which was the right move, because the teaching degree does not mean you can just teach in a school. It's required, like it was required for my current job. So doing that was a good idea. And it was the second last day of the school year that I was so discouraged. I was just like, what am I going to do? And a friend of mine sent me a job posting. Science North was looking for an astronomer, and I was living in Sudbury at the time.
Wow.
And I was like, that got me through my last day of teaching. Like, I was going to apply to this job, and I did, and I got it, and it was wonderful. And that was what brought me back to free choice learning, to not the formal education system. And this is definitely where I enjoy myself. So.
Wow, so it's really interesting to me that you you taught for an entire year. And despite not really liking this mainstream classroom kind of thing, even though you were discouraged, you still found a way to do education, to get back into astronomy, and to do things that you're really passionate about. And I think a lot of people get discouraged if a job is not exactly what they wanted, but it does open doors to a lot of other places.
And I mean, I had the same thing partway through the physics degree, physics and astronomy degree, right? It was
They're tough.
like I was ready to go become a cabinet maker, which I think I would have really enjoyed too. But I have 3 university pieces of paper, and I had to really push to finish the first 2. The third one, I think I finally found the field that I enjoy.
What was the third one that you really enjoyed?
Graduate diploma in science communication.
Oh, is that the Science North program?
Science North and Laurentian University, yeah.
Right.
It's fantastic. So if there's
know a
any
few.
older than finishing up, elementary or secondary school,
Yeah.
if you have some folks watching who are interested in postgraduate stuff, it's a good one, and it's now a master's program.
That's right. I actually know quite a few people who've graduated from that program, and every one of them says that it was a really amazing thing to do and really gave them a leg up in their science communication careers. I'm curious, how did you end up at the ROM?
I was moving back south, and there was an opening. They were looking for part-time teachers. And I had already at that point, between working with the reverse engineered planetarium projector at York, and working with the planetarium at Science North, I had about 10 years of planetarium experience under my belt already. And so it was like, great, here's a person who already knows the system we're using. We don't have to train them. Hooray! And also, I'm bilingual. So, yeah. So I started part-time, and now I'm full-time.
That happens with a lot of people, is they start, especially I think in science communication, where the jobs are few and far between, is you end up starting part-time and sticking with it and building and building and building. And did that take you a long time to go from, hey, your first contract part-time position to what you're doing now?
It took a few years, and I would say, I mean, I'm one of the few, right, that's made it to having a full-time position. The full-time positions are rare,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
So we got to how you ended up at the ROM. You had this passion going through. You got to do three amazing degrees in very different things that have all contributed to where you're at now. What are your goals? What do you want to do? Where do you want to take the things that you're doing and go further?
Not to say that I'm a professional student, because I'm not, but I'd like to upgrade my graduate diploma to a master's. My kids are still a little young, so I'd have to wait a little while before I do that.
This is the science communication one? You'd want to upgrade to a
Yeah, the
master's?
science communication one. I was talking to Chantal Barriot, who runs the program, recently, and she's like, yeah, it's not as much work as you would think to go from, like, to upgrade. It might just be a course or two. So maybe I'll have a fun time to do that. I'll dig into that a little bit more. I would really like to do some visitor research. It's kind of the area that I'm interested in. And, like, I guess learner research, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
like, how do people learn in the planetarium, and what are the most useful ways of going about teaching the planetarium that people will get the most out of? I think that would be really an interesting thing to do.
That's a great idea. I mean, it's something that, we're in this industry, this niche industry, and we do have a society, and we have people who are doing some of that research, but I think that more is always better, especially now that we're in kind of the digital age of planetariums, right? Is we need to know what really works and what really doesn't. And we also have a new generation of learners too. So now we're saying, well, how are they learning different? How is the planetarium helping them? That kind of thing. So that's really amazing. And it can take a long time, but at least you're in that planetarium sphere where you can say, well, now I have the ability to start doing this a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a matter of having the time of institutional buy-in. So we'll see how that goes. But
yeah, fair enough.
yeah, I think that I mean, there is one academic paper out there with my name on it because I happened to be the coordinator at the observatory when it was published, but I'd like to have some like other publications at some point.
Hey, one is a good start, and a lot of people don't have that, so that's a pretty solid start. At least you got your name on some scientific history there. Right on. Okay, so we're gonna go a little more goofy. What is your favorite celestial object? Like, as somebody who's now seen a lot of them up close because you're in a planetarium, you've done astronomy in space, you've worked at the observatory, you've obviously seen a lot of what's out in the universe, and then of course we're living in an age where some of the biggest telescopes in the world produce these gorgeous images of celestial objects. What is the one that you identify with the most? What do you like the most? What's your like, hey, this is my favorite?
Yeah, see, this is where I'm going to cheat because how can you ask me to choose just one?
You can choose 10 if you like. I don't mind.
All right.
I have no time limit.
I have favorites in different categories, right? So like favorite planetary nebula, the Ring Nebula.
Yeah.
Easy to find. Looks like a donut. So pretty. Rainbow colors in the, the big telescope images. There was a time where I was like, I'm going to get that tattooed somewhere. I didn't do it. But that's how much I was into the Ring Nebula and still am. Favorite galaxy, the Andromeda Galaxy. It's like the closest big one to us. It's like our sister in the, local group or whatever. And it's so pretty and it's so far and mysterious despite being, our sister galaxy. I have a soft spot for Pluto. Not going to start that debate here. But those images that came back from New Horizons were just phenomenal.
We're still learning a lot about it too.
Oh yeah. I love that it has the little heart. Like Pluto.
We love you too, Pluto.
Right? My oldest was 5 when there was the flyby. And she came with me to the event at York. And then she was still in a phase where it was like, okay, mommy, now draw on my back so I will go to sleep. And so for like weeks after, I would just draw this circle with a heart in it. She was like, Pluto!
Oh, that's amazing. A nice influence to have.
Yeah, I don't push astronomy on my kids, but they've both kind of taken a liking to it because I like it. I try to keep it as wide open as possible. They as long as they're pursuing something that they enjoy.
Well, that's important. I think that I think that just by sheer virtue of you being their parent, they're going to have some connection to it. And, whether they choose to pursue it or not, they're always going to have that connection that you've created, right? Hey, there you are.
Hey, speak of the devil. You like astronomy? No? Okay.
You like Mom, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's perfect. So is that all your favorites? Do you have any other favorites you'd like to share with us?
Let's see, what else? I mean, I have a few stars that I think are quite interesting. Alberio is always a neat one to show people through the telescope.
Yeah. I like that you've chosen objects that are all telescope, like amateur telescope visible. You don't need a Canon like a literal cannon of a telescope to be able to see all of them, right? You talked about the Ring Nebula, which, it's pretty deep space, requires a decent sized telescope, but Andromeda you can see with your eyes and binoculars.
That's my gauge of dark sky.
Yeah,
Can
there you
I
go.
see Andromeda?
Pluto's a bit tougher, but we have New Horizons.
Well, yeah. And I mean, I've seen Pluto through a telescope too. You just have to go back and look at it over several nights. It's the one that is not in the same spot as the other stars.
Well, that's really amazing, because then you're actually walking through the footsteps of Tombaugh when he was discovering it, of saying, okay, well, let's look at it. And he took a photographic plate, but it's, let's look at it tonight, let's look at it tomorrow, and it's moved. Must be closer to us than all those stars, right?
Yeah.
So that's really cool. Okay, so we had this New Horizons going by Pluto, and it was really shocking what it saw and what it found. I feel like astronomy is one of those sciences where you're always finding these new and exciting things. So the question then becomes, what's going to be the next big, I guess, surprise discovery, do you think, in the next, say, 10 years?
That's a tough question to answer. I don't have a crystal ball. But so I don't know what we're going to discover, but I have maybe an inkling of how we're going to get there. It's only been a few years that we've been able to detect gravitational waves, and that's a whole other, up until this point, it's been like, well, we've got light to work with. It's bringing in a whole other set of data, and once we start putting that together, I think it's going to open the door to a lot of amazing discoveries that just weren't possible before. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Okay, so the extension of gravitational wave observatories and using that new sense that we have on the universe.
Yeah, it's like we had our eyes and now we can taste or something, if we were going to make
taste is good.
An analogy to our senses.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so on that note then, aside from big discoveries, how about a big milestone in space flight? When will the first human walk on Mars?
Oh, that's such a tough question.
I'm not giving you everything easy here,
It's interesting because when I was in university, years ago, no, that was like 15, 20 years ago, already, we're going to Mars and how are we going to get to Mars and what's the best plan to go to Mars was already a big discussion.
Yeah.
And who knows, it might have already been a big discussion before that. That's just when I became aware of it. And my sense at the time was like, I don't think it's going to be in my lifetime, maybe in the next, century or so. And we've been making leaps. I feel like we're getting closer. A lot of people will say, okay, the first person to step foot on Mars is alive already, and they may be, in elementary school or something like that. And maybe that's the case. I'm really interested to see how this moon thing goes. I'm excited for Canadarm2 and the Gateway space station. But really, the moon is the farthest we've ever gone, and we haven't been there since the 70s. And there's so many, we know we can get robots to Mars. Mars is entirely populated by robots. Getting people there is harder, but there's so many people working on it. I don't know. Maybe the person who's going to be the first to set foot on Mars is alive. And maybe I'll be old and gray when it happens. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay, that's a good answer. We tend to downplay the difficulty, the cost, aside from money, the cost, right? There's a lot to get there. Robots we can send there and say, oh, off you go, see you later. So, never, we're not coming to get you. Good luck, people we have to bring back, and there's so many challenges around that I know you and I have talked about before. Just getting there, taking 9 months one way, and then waiting for the next window to come back. There's just so many more challenges than the moon, which is 3 days away. And yet we talk about the moon like it's this easy thing, right?
Yeah.
It's most
and
certainly
you've
not.
also got to think, like, we have all this infrastructure for taking off from Earth, right? It's not like the rockets are taking off from, like, my backyard. Like, that's going to have to be in place on Mars to get people back as well. So there's a lot of groundwork that needs to be done before we're ready to, you know, take that risky first step of, like, okay, well, not first step, but first human step, if you will, of, like, actually sending someone to Mars.
Okay, so that's another question then. Are there a lot more robotic missions that need to happen before we're ready to send humans?
I mean, I would imagine that robotic, like, even once we have humans on Mars, I mean, it's a big planet, right?
Yeah.
Robotics are still going to play a big role, I think. So, like, maybe there's, like, you know, Mars home base, and you send out robots from there, so it becomes less expensive because you're just, you know, you don't have that travel and you know, launch and all that. At some point, if we're going to send a person, I think we need to switch from robot research to robot building infrastructure.
Oh, that's an interesting point too, right? There is a lot of prep required to wait for the arrival of humans who are going to stay there a long time, right? Especially if we're not going to say, hey, let's pack everything on a spaceship and send it one way, and that's just, well, hope it works out. Right?
Yeah.
If we can get a lot of that infrastructure there first, that's going to help. That's going to help a lot. Now, would you go to Mars? Or let's start it even simpler. Would you just go up in orbit? Would you take that first step?
Okay, so I would love to know what it feels like to be in microgravity. Like, I think that would just be so cool. However, my body is delicate in certain aspects. Like, I don't even like to fly. Like, I will fly because I want to go places that, you know, are just not convenient to get to in other ways. But I don't think I would be a very happy astronaut.
You know, how about a supersonic jet that took you just into low Earth orbit?
Maybe.
Baby
Try
steps.
that.
Baby steps, right?
But you were never going to get me on anything called a vomit comet. Like, that's...
Yeah, that good old NASA astronaut training plane. Let's go up,
yeah.
and we'll go down.
No thanks.
And we'll go up, and then we'll go down. Just do that a few hundred times. You'll be a pro. It's
Yeah.
more like you're just getting out the nausea for the next 30 years, and then you'll be ready.
If
for
only
space.
that's the way it really worked.
If only, yeah. Okay, so here's a bit of a curveball for you. What do you think about life in the universe?
All right. So this is a question that I've answered many times because it's one that people always want to know. And I think when I first started answering this was around the time where the Hubble Deep Field had been released, right?
Yeah.
That beautiful image where, like, everything except, like, 3 dots is a galaxy. So, and that is just a tiny piece of the sky. There's got to be something out there. Are aliens coming to Earth and kidnapping people and probing them? I'm not buying into that, but the odds of life out there somewhere, unfortunately too far for us to ever know about, probably.
Is it life like us?
Don't know.
Are we the pinnacle?
No, we are so not the pinnacle. So life like us as in, like, sentient? Or, like, are there other humanoids somewhere in the universe?
We'll go broad. We'll go sentient, life that can consider itself life.
I think so. Like, the universe is infinite. Like, even if we're going, you know, the old, was it 10,000 monkeys at typewriters?
Yeah.
Right? Like, I feel like that's what evolution is. It's just like 10,000 monkeys.
There we have it. Julie Tome's tagline: evolution in a nutshell. 10,000 monkeys typing at
10,000
typewriters.
monkeys. Eventually
producing the
something
genetic
works
code
out,
of
right?
humanity.
Like it's all experimentation. So like the odds of evolution working out the same way on two planets, even if they were similar, I think are astronomical, pardon the pun. So, I mean, are we going to find other humanoids out there? I'd be surprised. But life getting to the point of sentience? Yeah, maybe.
There's probably a planet of intelligent mushrooms out there right now.
Hey, mushrooms are awesome. They're the communication system between trees.
See, and this is what I love about science communication and about, you know, you working at the Royal Ontario Museum, is that there's so much of that cross-pollination. Like you learn all these little tidbits about all the different sciences, and there's those little connections, those little things that make you a better astronomer, or better to talk about something like life in the universe.
Aw, thanks.
Okay, so we've asked pretty much every question on my list. I've learned actually a lot of things about you, and you and I have been friends for a long time, and it's nice it's still nice to learn new things, because I you know, this is part of this whole interview series, is I want to learn more about people who are in our community of astronomers, amateur astronomers, science communicators, journalists, researchers, all of that jazz. So it's nice to hear your story. So now that we've heard your kind of journey going through all of this, what advice do you have for another generation of kids who like space, who like astronomy, and may have that vision that you had of, oh, I'm going to go and do a degree and then a master's and then a PhD and then become a professor? What advice do you have for them coming up now?
Yeah, my advice and I find that especially, you know, once students are in like the upper years of high school, they start really like feeling the pressure to decide, and it's always like, how did you decide what you were going to do for the rest of your life? And it's like, well, I didn't, right? I decided what I wanted to try, and then that either worked out or it didn't. If you talk to most people who've had, you know, any sort of length of career, it's rare that you'll find someone who's like, you know, when I was 5, I decided I was going to be a whatever, and then I became that thing. It's a winding path, and there's no way when you're in elementary school or high school that you could know everything there is out there, right? So as you learn more, as you are introduced to more things, then you can make course adjustments. My advice is be ready to make course adjustments. And remember that, you know, there are and I get I have examples of this at the museum all over the place, right? Like people think of, you know, the only way to be involved in space is either be an astronaut or an engineer or an astronomer. And it's like, well, those are 3 great jobs in the sector, but also like if you have a passion for art, you could become an artist, and you know, all those artists' impression of, you know, the spacecraft approaching Mars, or you know, what the exoplanet should look like, you know, those weren't made by, you know, engineers, astronauts, and astronomers. Those were made by artists. So there's as you said, there's cross-pollination, right? There's overlapping of fields, and you can find a way to bring passions together, to bring interests together into something that would be the place that you enjoy to be.
That's really wonderful advice. Thanks for that, Julie.
You're welcome.
I do have one more question for you.
Yes.
If you could chat for an hour, say have lunch, share a meal, pick the brain of any scientist, living or dead, for any time in history, who would you choose?
See, this is where I'm cheating again. I can't pick just one.
Perfect.
And, you know, like over the last several years, I've been adding really interesting scientists and science communication experts to my Twitter feed, people who, you know, have a lot of intersectionality in, like, people of color, LGBTQ plus, women. I would like to get, and sure, let's pull in some people who are no longer of this on the planet. So we'll go back to as far as, like, let's say Hypatia in ancient Greece, and just gather all these people who are not what most would generally think of as, you know, a typical scientist, in a room, and I will just flit from table to table and listen in on all those conversations.
I like that. A nice celestial cocktail party.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I think it would be a riot.
I think it would be a riot. And I think not just with you being able to talk to all of these people, but them being able to talk to one another, right? I often look at these people who are long since past, these great astronomers, scientists, thinkers, and I wonder that if I could go back and tell them all the things that we know now, you know, I'd blow their mind, and maybe they'd blow mine with some of the things that we didn't know that they knew, you know?
Imagine blowing Einstein's mind.
I think I'd have to go back a lot further than Einstein to blow a professional scientist's mind.
I don't know. I mean, okay, so imagine you're Einstein, right?
All right.
Throughout your career, you've come up with these things, these ideas, but there's no way to test them. And, like, every time we've tested a piece of Einstein's theoretical work, it's turned out to be accurate. Like, don't you think that would blow his mind?
I think if he came back and learned about dark energy and his cosmological constant, I think that would probably blow his mind.
Right? Wonder if he had imposter syndrome.
I think I have to believe that most people do. I think that when you're working, as a society, we put so many people on these high pedestals of knowledge or intelligence. They're still people. They still suffered. They still were unsure at points in their life of what they were doing or why they were doing it. And I think that's the human connection that we don't often think about with historical figures, with these titans of science, you know.
This is why I like learning the crazy stories about the scientists, right?
Makes them more human too, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for chatting. This has been really fun.
Thanks for asking me to be a part of this. This was fun.
You're the first part of this, which is really exciting.